Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
This is an Omega Watchman Media Group production.
Due to the mature nature of this content, language, and depth, viewer discretion is advised.
Are you ready for the Great Reset? 2021 may be a pivotal year. Wealthy global elites are planning your future, and what they intend for America and the world may startle you.
Here's a video of your future if some people at the World Economic Forum get their way. They say you'll own nothing and be happy about it. Energy will be green, rationed, and expensive, and travel will be restricted. Even your diet will be controlled, and currency will be digital. This left-wing dystopian dream is called the Great Reset.
Global carbon prices, only eat meat as a treat, billions of refugees from climate change. I have only ever repeated the words of Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, the words of Prince Charles, who said use all the levers, the words of the head of the United Nations, Guterres, who says we must use COVID to counter climate change, and many other very powerful and influential individuals who insist we must go straight from COVID lockdowns to climate lockdowns. So the timing of Ms. Davies' piece smearing me for trying to suggest that there was some kind of conspiracy linking COVID to climate change could not actually have been worse. At the same time she was penning her conspiracy theory article, the World Economic Forum were putting the finishing touches to their latest ad, telling us what plans they have. Wait for it. They think that lockdowns are necessary for tackling climate change. Lockdowns are good. Don't believe me? Well, have a listen to this and I'll read out the subtitles just to underline them of their latest ad. Earth's seismic noise has been the lowest in decades due to lockdowns. Scientists saw a wave of quiet around the world in 2020. Ambient noise in some cities fell 50% as fewer people used transport and factories closed. There were also record falls in air pollution, clearing city skies from Asia to America. But by late 2020, it had returned to pre-pandemic levels.
Who made billions out of creating super clunky corporate software. What you didn't realize is that Bill Gates doesn't think of himself that way. Bill Gates doesn't think of himself as some guy who got super rich making bad software. Bill Gates thinks of himself as God, in control of the solar system. And that's why Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing global cooling.
Well, just following on what I was saying about Daniel Andrews, it was 25 years ago that the then president of the Czech Republic, Václav Havel, spoke at our National Press Club 25 years ago. He talked about a crisis of authority from the perspective, Czechoslovakia, of one who'd suffered totalitarianism. Now think of it. As Kevin Andrews said, from the Prime Minister down, quote, the daily media conferences of the Victorian Premier, the possessor of all detail, the bearer of all knowledge, continually blaming the citizenry for the failures of his administration. Well, we ought not to imagine that this isn't leading us somewhere. But of course, to suggest it might be is to be accused of dealing with conspiracies. But from coronavirus, we have seen the growth of state power. And even though in the world there are 104,000 patients with coronavirus who are critical, that represents 0.0013% of the population. Yet leaders are hanging on to this power. I spoke to Maurice Newman about this last year. He made the outstanding point of these leaders, ours included, so-called liberal leaders. I quote Maurice Newman, no doubt they view individual freedom as an optional extra, not an inalienable right, and want their new powers to become a normal part of governing, unquote. Significantly, he went on about these people who are so-called governing. Quote, it was their gross incompetence or deliberate intent which gave them the present commanding heights. First, despite clear evidence of COVID's virulence, the World Health Organization kowtowed to Beijing by playing down the risks of infection. Then when the spread threatened the capacity of global medical resources, health authorities modelled catastrophic scenarios to frighten citizens into submission and to justify enforceable draconian lockdowns imposed without regard for basic rights or economic cost. Much of the quote-unquote expert advice relied upon has been exposed as politically biased, not scientifically based. Well, back to my point. What is the agenda here? Do we just assume that the liberties and freedoms and economic advantages that we've taken for granted for so long are safe and secure? After all, here we are seeking to impeach an American who's no longer president. And Trump's been vilified from one end of the earth to the other. Coronavirus, well, 0.06% of Americans have died, not from it, but with it. But Trump created 7 million new jobs. The average unemployment rate was lower than that of any administration in the history of America. The unemployment rate for women was the lowest in 70 years. African American youth unemployment was at an all-time low. African American poverty had declined to the lowest rate ever recorded. But these successes sit uncomfortably with outfits like the World Economic Forum, whose ranks include people like Prince Charles and Al Gore and that schoolgirl. They're all there. George Soros, Greenpeace, the President of the European Bank, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. Remember it. They say that after COVID, climate action must be top of the agenda. And the forum's founder and executive chairman is a professor, Klaus Schwab, an 82-year-old German economist who is co-author of a book called The Great Reset. 3 big words. To quote, make society fairer, smarter and greener, and to get humanity off the road to climate catastrophe. A great reset, he calls it, at the book launch last year, to quote, make the world work with nature rather than exploit the natural world, unquote. If businesses start to prioritise nature, that could add 395 million new jobs globally by 2030, unquote. Make no mistake, the left are in the ascendant. This fellow Schwab has said, quote, the changes we've already seen in response to COVID-19 prove that a reset of our economic and social foundations is possible. Well, it goes without saying that Trump was a major obstacle to all of this, hence the emphasis on a decarbonised economy and talk that, quote, companies should serve all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Is this a threat or is it not? I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't take this seriously. James Delingpole is an English writer, journalist and columnist. He's published novels and political books. He's published articles rejecting the so-called scientific consensus on climate change, and he opposes wind power. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He's the son of a factory owner, but a graduate of Oxford University in English language and literature. He argues we must understand the meaning of the Great Reset and its impact on our civilisation. We've spoken to James before, but he joins us again. James Delingpole, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. I mean, these people are seeking to transform the world economy, aren't they?
Yeah, I think there's a question that a lot of people are asking right now, and you just asked it again, which is, why are they doing this? And the answer is quite simply, this is a coup by the globalist elite. It's happening in your country, it's happening in my country, we've seen it's happened in America. These guys are very serious about their plan, which ultimately is to reduce us to the status of serfs, which of course elites have done throughout the ages. I mean, the Western democracy is actually a relatively uncommon phenomenon, the freedoms we enjoy. We're reverting in a way to the historic norm where a tiny elite controlled the people and crushed their spirit. Yeah. And the World Economic Forum produced a video in 2016 in which this starry-eyed young person said, welcome to 2030. I own nothing, I have no privacy, and life has never been better. Well, it doesn't sound like a better life to me. It sounds horrible where we don't own any property.
No,
so
that's right.
Who does own the property?
They've made this point, haven't they? This great reset. There'll be no money, no private property, no democracy. Some big outfit will take over all our debt. All our debt. We'll have no debt, whatever, your credit cards, your bank loans, all that sort of stuff. But in return, you'll have no money, no private property, no democracy. Every key decision, and what you do for a living, how much stuff you consume, as you've said, will be decided by a remote, unaccountable elite. This is not conspiracy. This is what these people are saying.
Yes. It is a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory, though.
Right.
It's not a conspiracy theory when they're telling you what they're doing, when they're putting out websites, when they're holding an annual conference attended by everyone from President Xi of China to Angela Merkel to President Putin. They're all there.
Are you ready for the Great Reset? 2021 may be a pivotal year. Wealthy global elites are planning your future, and what they intend for America and the world may startle you. Dale Hurd explains.
Here's a video of your future if some people at the World Economic Forum get their way. They say you'll own nothing and be happy about it. Energy will be green, rationed, and expensive, and travel will be restricted. Even your diet will be controlled, and currency will be digital. This left-wing dystopian dream is called the Great Reset, and you're supposed to be excited about it. The Great Reset has been labeled a conspiracy theory, and even sounds like a conspiracy theory. But everything we know about it comes from the global elites themselves, who have been quite open about it.
This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a well-documented movement among many of the world's most powerful people.
Justin Haskins is a leading authority on the Great Reset.
Fundamentally, this is a radical and complete transformation of everything that we do in our society to control people's behaviors, to control businesses, and to move society in the direction that you want to move it. It will change the way businesses are evaluated. It'll coerce businesses to pursue left-wing causes.
The Great Reset was unveiled at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where many of the world's most powerful people go to offer solutions to the world's problems. And the World Economic Forum sees the coronavirus pandemic as a historic opportunity to change the way the world operates.
Right now, we're facing a crisis of international proportion. It's going to have long-term impact for us.
Their solution is essentially global socialism. Think of the Green New Deal combined with the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, and throw in something called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, in which technology is supposed to radically change the way we live and work. Klaus Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum.
What the Fourth Industrial Revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
It has the support not only of world leaders, but of global corporations like MasterCard and BP, brought to you by people who think they know what's best for you.
By giving, the elites, the technocrats in society, the most educated people, the ability to manipulate society, pull the levers in society, and manage and manipulate society so that it's, in their minds, perfect.
1 week before the election, Italian Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano wrote an open letter to the president, warning him that the Great Reset is inhuman, faceless tyranny that seeks to subdue all of humanity, and that President Trump and the United States are the wall against the deep state, the final assault of the children of darkness.
Over the past 4 years, Donald Trump has been the single greatest roadblock for people who are pushing this internationalist, globalist sort of agenda.
The World Economic Forum and the Biden campaign even share the same slogan, Build Back Better.
To build back better.
It's also a phrase you've heard being used by Justin Trudeau, by the Pope, by the Prince of Wales, and by leaders around the world.
English journalist and author James Delingpole.
You'd be amazed by how many world leaders are on board with this globalist plan, even people that claim to be conservative. This is worse than Nazism. This is worse than communism. This is worse than fascism. These guys are planning on taking over the whole world.
Dale Hurd joins us with more via Skype. Dale, how might Joe Biden and Kamala Harris help to rapidly advance this global reset plan?
Well, it's hard to find anything in this agenda that any liberal would object to, unless, I guess, you got down to AOC and they thought corporations were doing too well or something. I mean, this is a liberal dream, a left-wing dream come true. It's bringing utopia to earth. And Donald Trump has been the major obstacle to the completion of this. Hence, as I mentioned, the letter from Archbishop Vigano that he was the only hope to stop this.
Now, what are we talking about here in practice? Are we talking about Chinese-style politics with restrictions greater than those imposed on Americans during the COVID pandemic?
It's in a sense a bargain. They want to take away your rights and give you more, and sort of, level the economy so that no one lacks, but then you give up your rights. For instance, they're big on us not owning anything. It's an Uber model applied to everything. And so you can have more, and maybe you don't have to pay for certain things, but they can be yanked away from you because you don't own them. It's the abolition of private property. It's the control of energy. They're going to essentially tax and penalize fossil fuels into the ground so that all that's left is green energy. This is their big chance to remake the world, and they're going for it.
And you mentioned how COVID-19 restrictions and lockdowns are playing into all of this. So what about the coronavirus vaccine? How is that going to be used to advance this agenda?
Well, they would certainly be for a mandate for vaccination in every country. Look, and it's astonishing the arrogance that this is all on the internet. This is all on their websites. It's not on conspiracy sites. I mean, they would love for everyone to be chipped, to get vaccinations for this and that. Essentially, under their plan, you lose control of your body, and it's this bargain that in exchange for that, you can trust them to make your life better.
And Dale, I noticed something big is missing in this plan of the global elites: God. No mention of him, faith, just this fusion of physical, digital, and biological identities. Nothing about the spiritual.
Yeah, and more arrogance. It's like the plot of a science fiction movie where you're asking, wait a minute, where's God in this? I mean, and that is the world that they live in. It's this giant disconnect between the elites of the world that live, I don't know where, and the working men and women of this world. And I personally think that this probably isn't going anywhere because it's so disconnected from our day-to-day lives.
A Great Reset. This is the plan by the World Economic Forum to encourage governments to use all the levers they used during lockdown, enforced business closures, 23-hour lockdowns, restricting how far you can go from your home, and ridiculously aggressive policing tactics in order to tackle climate change. The Guardian last week ran a lengthy and, to be frank, fairly tedious article by someone I'd never heard of called Anne Davies attacking me, it seems to be my week, for spreading conspiracy theories about the Great Reset, accompanied by a photo of myself looking suitably deranged and unhinged. Sometimes it's just out-and-out conspiracy material drawn from the QAnon playbook, like Rowan Dean's multiple reports on the supposed secret agenda of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, Ms. Davies wrote in her piece. Well, first of all, I have no idea what the QAnon playbook is, other than that apparently you have to dress up like Chewbacca in buffalo horns and paint your face. But that's beside the point, not my cup of tea. Ms. Davies clearly doesn't understand what a conspiracy theory is. There is no secret agenda about the Great Reset. They're shouting it from the rafters. It's not me saying they want you to own nothing and be happy about it. It's them. global carbon prices, only eat meat as a treat, billions of refugees from climate change. I have only ever repeated the words of Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, the words of Prince Charles, who said use all the levers, the words of the head of the United Nations, Guterres, who says we must use COVID to counter climate change, and many other very powerful and influential individuals who insist we must go straight from COVID lockdowns to climate lockdowns. So the timing of Ms. Davies' piece smearing me for trying to suggest that there was some kind of conspiracy linking COVID to climate change could not actually have been worse. At the same time she was penning her conspiracy theory article, the World Economic Forum were putting the finishing touches to their latest ad, telling us what plans they have. Wait for it. They think that lockdowns are necessary for tackling climate change. Lockdowns are good. Don't believe me? Well, have a listen to this and I'll read out the subtitles just to underline them of their latest ad. Earth's seismic noise has been the lowest in decades due to lockdowns. Scientists saw a wave of quiet around the world in 2020. Ambient noise in some cities fell 50% as fewer people used transport and factories closed. There were also record falls in air pollution, clearing city skies from Asia to America. But by late 2020, it had returned to pre-pandemic levels. Carbon emissions were also down 7% last year, but the drop won't slow climate change unless we lock in emissions cuts. How quiet was your local area?
Who made billions out of creating super clunky corporate software. What you didn't realize is that Bill Gates doesn't think of himself that way. Bill Gates doesn't think of himself as some guy who got super rich making bad software. Bill Gates thinks of himself as God, in control of the solar system. And that's why Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing global cooling. Ooh, that's not fraught with risks. You thought gain-of-function research on pathogens was dangerous. Try that. But that hasn't stopped Harvard University. Its scientists are testing that technology by spewing calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
Now, just to restate, Bill Gates is not God. Bill Gates is some kind of weird, socially awkward rich guy who lives in Seattle. He doesn't own the planet. But he's now changing the planet single-handedly. This is not just over his yard in Seattle. This is over your yard and our oceans and the whole planet. Now, according to Forbes, Frank Kutch, who is the project's top investigator, quote, does not know what the results might bring. Oh, just experiment with the globe and find out what happens. It's cool, though. He's a billionaire. Michael Schellenberger is the author of Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All, which it does, as our rivers and oceans get dirtier and no one notices. Michael, it's great to see you tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
It's a little alarming to think that someone as myopic and out of touch and totally ideological and weird as Bill Gates thinks he's in charge of the planet. What should we be worried about here?
I mean, basically everything. I mean, when I first heard about this over 2 decades ago, this was a thought experiment. But this is real. They're really trying to do this. They've encountered opposition every step of the way. I've co-authored articles with the Harvard investigator. We've told him personally this is a terrible idea. The vast majority of scientists disagree with this. You have to remember what they're proposing to do is identical to what we feared would occur after nuclear war in the 1980s, which is nuclear winter. The idea is that you cool the planet deliberately. The effects on crops are completely unknown. They call this an experiment, but they know that there is no way to figure out what the large-scale planetary effects of this kind of thing would be. It's grossly irresponsible. They know for a fact that they will never get international agreement on this. So they're basically trying to socialize the idea, normalize the idea, make us comfortable with an idea that should make us extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, a guy who cuts his hair with garden shears is now trying to control the solar system. The funny thing is, anyone who notices this, that maybe Bill Gates has outsized control over our lives, is immediately denounced by Snopes or one of these fraudulent fact-checking sites as a conspiracy nut. Do you think you're a conspiracy nut to have concerns about Bill Gates' hubris and ambitions?
No, I mean, this is bonkers. I mean, honestly, there are very few people, when you talk to them privately, that think this is a good idea. There's a lot of people that are very scared to speak out publicly because Bill Gates' influence is extraordinary. He's a massive philanthropist. I think his intentions are very good. Nobody doubts he's well-intentioned. But good intentions can lead to some very bad things. The amount of hubris and arrogance involved here, we're talking about millions of farmers around the world who will be affected by this. How will they be consulted? What is the idea for how this is going to be governed? There is no plan for governance. There is no way to get agreement on this internationally. They know this. You know, Tucker, the thing is, the trends on climate change, most people don't realize they're going in the right direction. The United States has reduced its carbon emissions by more than any other country over the last 20 years. We've had an extraordinary success in the United States in reducing our air pollution.